During that introduction, Dr. Heim looked over, said, you ran into someone that knew me, because he was ready for whatever story was going to come out of that. I can tell you, I told Dean Mercer that after that wonderful presentation this morning, that my role was simply to give directions to lunch, and I think that that's probably true, right? And then, when I left here as an undergraduate, as a social studies major, now I am going to tell stories about Dr. Heim myself because of that 3%, that why social studies people can't find jobs. We were just lucky to have a job. We just wanted a job somewhere. Please, someone hire us. And fortunately, some good people in Tuscany, Kansas did. I'm going to share some things with you that are a little bit of the work of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. So there's going to be a lot of discussion about that later on today. So I'm just going to hit some highlights of that. Some work that the state board's doing, the Teacher Vacancy and Supply Committee, and just kind of tell the story, I think, as a follow-up to the research that's been presented to you this morning. So it's already been said, but I get the outstanding opportunity each month to work for a Board of Education that elected by all of you, that serves to represent Kansas in trying to design, accredit, license teachers, and do all this work around schools. And I think that that's really important. Many states do not have a state board of ed, and if they do, they're appointed either by the governor and or through the legislative process. And that makes a very volatile system. I think you're watching that play out in Missouri right now as a change in governor and a change in appointment happens. In fact, because people in my position are either 1/3 are elected, 1/3 are appointed by a governor or through a system I just talked about, and 1/3 are hired, the average tenure of a school chief state officer is around 2.5 years. And so when you look at that related to a state board or however education is governed in a state, I am grateful every day that we have some stability in Kansas that brings, I think, to all of us a sense of relief. And I want to just thank these 10 members because they give greatly, and they're here today, as has always been, has been talked about, that these people do a wonderful job. And they've said, we have a new direction, here's where we're going. It's a really simple vision statement, but it's instructive for so many levels. How do we lead the world? Well, we can't do that if we don't have an outstanding educator in the classroom, and we don't have an outstanding principal in the building, and stability and an outstanding leader as superintendent. So to lead the world, we have some metrics that we have around that, but it really is about the success of each student. And the research that was presented this morning, as most of the research does, as we look back, has been all about student achievement. I'm going to talk some about that because the state board, as you know, has said, by simply only looking at student achievement, we haven't looked at the total aspect of the child of what is going to make him or her successful. So, as we think about the research, I'm really proud the state board said, when we look at the goals that the state board is going to take a look at, you see them there in front of you, leading off with social and emotional growth. But what you don't see up there, which I believe was maybe the #1 reason that teachers leave the profession, is a test score and the chasing of a test score. The state board said, well over 2 years ago, we're not chasing a test score. And yet, I'm in schools every week, and what I hear from young teachers, and I'm talking about 35 years of age to 21, is I don't know how to do that. I only know how to teach to a test. I came out of school knowing how to do that. I was told I would be evaluated, and I tell the veterans, You may have all early onset dementia, but you can remember if we really take heed of that. So I'm really proud of that because the state board says, academics will always be important, but how we go about this is certainly important as we go through it. So I want to thank them again for this work. It isn't easy. It's not done. It will never be done. But you can see there the things that they're trying to propose. And again, social emotional growth of students is so important as we go forward. So I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the summary conclusions of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. One of the things that all of us are doing in every state is trying to address this recruitment retention cycle that was so well described this morning of how do we make sure that we have quality people with our students. And so this will again be talked about in depth, but I want to thank Dr. Weaver, Rudy Perez. They co-chaired this task force and did really important work. And so I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things. First of all, these are their findings, and it's about 1.5 years old now, but it's still instructive because it's still true today. 99% of the positions in Kansas are filled. I want to stop right there because I was telling Dr. Dole, in higher ed, which it should be, it's all about the research. I don't know, and then a little bit about the story. In K-12, we all want to tell the story, and it's a little bit about the research. And one of the stories that keeps being told over and over and over, no matter how loud I shout and jump up and down, is that everyone's going to Missouri because my good friend, Darrell Hurl, who used to be from Kansas and went over to Independence, Missouri, put a billboard up on I-70. He said, come to Missouri. Well, you only put a billboard up if no one's coming to your state to teach, I guess. I don't know, except I do know this, that we import almost in a 2-to-1 ratio of those from other states to here. You wouldn't believe that, right? If you just thought, no. It's kind of like here's one of the myths I hear all the time. Well, wasn't the lottery money supposed to go for education in Kansas? No, never. Never was set up that way, but because other states have done it. And so we hear everyone must be going out of state. We import. And in fact, most of our vacancies are filled with qualified people. Now, that doesn't help Rudy when he can't find a good teacher. And that story, which I get every single week when I'm out, starts to drive policy. And I think we ought to take a deep breath and reflect upon that as was presented today and say, as we think about policy, let's make sure that it does what we hope that it will do. There is a slight decline in the teacher preparation programs, but there's a fairly significant decline in the majors. And again, Dean Mercer and I have had this conversation. If you want to know where the bottom probably is in the near future, it's sitting in the junior class in colleges and the 20-some preparation schools right now. That seems to be the lowest number going to be coming out in the next several years, and the sophomore and freshman class seems to be up. So as we're talking about data, the shortage is real, but it's limited, and we're going to probably see a little bit more of that in the near future than not. I think also, retaining new teachers, a lot was said about that, and how we go about doing that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some efforts that we have there that maybe are a little bit different as we go forward. And very specifically, where is the 1%? Where are the real shortages in Kansas, and they're geographic? I remember having a conversation with Governor Brown back when he first came into office, and like every governor, and soon-to-be Governor Collier will wrestle with this, and if it's Governor Collier after the election or someone else will wrestle with this, and it is how do we grow the state of Kansas? I mean, that's the real issue. And Governor Brownback, had a lot of different ways to do that. But I will say this, and this is the hypothesis anecdotal. How many times do you talk to people and they say, yeah, I've been to Kansas. Well, I've been through Kansas. I flew over Kansas, right? Even from the settlers, did you notice when the settlers came across, they didn't stop? There's a reason why many people don't settle in Kansas. It's, we don't have a lot of mountains and lakes, and the weather isn't stable like San Diego. It varies a lot. So you have to be unique to want to live here. And so when you look at western Kansas, or you look at Highway 36 from Atchison to St. Francis, you see a declining population. And you've been seeing it since the turn of the 1900s. It's not anything new, and it continues to grow. So Rudy out in Norton finds it difficult to attract really good teachers. I flew out to Garden City last week to have a great celebration of their Crystal Apple Award winners. And, again, I heard the story of how hard it is to attract teachers. And certainly, it's southwestern Kansas when you look at the data they'll be talked about later today. It's the urban areas of Wichita, it's the urban areas of Kansas City, Kansas. Now that does not mean if you're studying in Cherryville, Kansas and southeast, you don't have a shortage at times. It just simply means where we can't seem to fill hardly at all are in those three regions going forward. Just a few other things that we ought to make teaching career attractive. Again, the Blue Ribbon Task Force and what you heard this morning. Retain early career teachers, talked about that. And start doing something about capers. Now this is about 1.5 years old, and I'll talk later on. There's been significant improvement on the capers, at least stability of that I think will work. And so right after the Blue Ribbon Task Force gave their decision and their report to the state board created the teacher vacancy and supply committee to then do the work going forward to continue to look at this and to bring policy. But I want to take a look back because I think the professor did a really good job of laying the groundwork for what should we do as practitioners, higher ed, people that are deeply concerned about this. And so part of that is, for the state board, what policies do we have to drive it? So I want to show you 3 that have been done in the last 5 years to attract more people into the profession. You probably have seen this. Let's start with the STEM license. This simply says, regardless of pedagogy, I have a degree in engineering or a math science field, and I can come directly into the classroom. That's the first item you see there. You can see over the 5 years how many people have taken advantage of that. Not very many, for a variety of the reasons that were probably discussed. You can see the second, which is in the career and tech ed field. Let's do the same. I know someone that works in construction and builds homes, and we're going to have a construction program. Can I go hire that person? And you can, again, see the limited number of people that have come into the profession over the last 5 years in that route. But those were 2 major routes. And Ken Willard asked the important question last month, or this month, when I shared that. Is it because we haven't told the story? Is it because we haven't marketed it? I think it's worth exploring that many people don't know. Part of what I hope you learn today are all the different ways we have in Kansas currently to get to licensure. Because I think there are still some things that aren't known. And then you can see the last part of this is I have an alternate license and then pick the state. In the state of Virginia, alternate license, and I want to come to Kansas, and those then don't quite match up what we want, and how many of those people have come that route. And you see we started with 80 and then we did a declining over that time, and that simply means that there's not necessarily a declining number. We're getting a little bit better at accepting those out of state. Mike and I were talking before and said, why can't we just accept any out-of-state license? The answer is we could. But there's some states you may not want to do that with. And the two that are commonly used, right or wrong, are Texas and Mississippi. Now, the running joke, since we are in Kansas and we like to bash on Texas because it's really easy, right, is, if you want to get a license in Texas, you find a 7-Eleven, and over the weekend that can happen, right? So it's this thing about licensure is related to having a standard by which we want our people to adhere to, and having a supply and demand problem over here. And that's the tension that we have as we go forward. So I cautioned the State Board of Ed this month and said, as we think about generating policy in the future, let's take a look at what policies have been done and whether or not that is solving the teacher shortage problem. And indeed, in this time frame, we issue about 20,000 licenses a year. Now that's substitutes included. So over this 5 years, we've issued about 100,000 licenses, and about 280 people have taken advantage of these 3 pathways. See the issue? So we understand, again, when I sat in McPherson, if I can't find a good, qualified, licensed teacher to be in that classroom, it's an emergency today, right? I can't wait. And so then we make a phone call, as I did. Brad, listen to me. I can't find someone. And then we grab a state board member. Ken Willard was my rep at the time. I need something. And yet that reaction, that's why I was happy to see the research part of it the morning, that reaction may not yield us the results we want. So I want to tell you about 3 very innovative things, because it's not just the state board. Higher ed is stepping up big time. And I just want to share with you one little part of this. I think it'll be shared out. There are many innovative things going on. I'm picking one of those, just one little area, and it's I'm a paraprofessional. I'm working in school today. I probably should have gone the teacher route because I love what I'm doing. You tell me I'm good at it, but guess what? I need to work, and I have 3 kids at home, and I'm not going to leave Dodge City, or I'm not going to leave Chanute. Can you help me? And the university said, yeah, let's think about that. Let's step up. So this is just what the information I received from the deans of higher ed, so I'm just kind of giving it to you. Fort Hays State has their program, and you read that. I'm not going to read it for you. But stepping up and saying we think we can do that. Washburn University stepping up to the plate, saying, you know what, at least if we look in some of the shortage areas related to special ed or STEM, we could do this. By the way, yes, we have a lot of shortages in special education. Yes, we have a lot in STEM, but we had 90 vacancies in elementary ed this year. And even when I'm in the Northeast, at Blue Valley or Shawnee Mission, which do not have a shortage, what they will tell you is the number of applicants and the number of quality applicants has diminished. So even though they're getting that. So Washburn's doing something. And by the way, I'm picking 3 Regents universities. But we could tell the story of Kansas Newman or Friends and many of the privates that are doing many of the same things. Wichita State University, again, reaching out, saying if you're a paraprofessional, A, you don't have to leave your job. B, we're going to deliver it to you in some kind of blended environment. C, we're going to reduce the tuition cost. You see all the things that are happening? And Shirley tells me at Wichita State they have 100 paraprofessionals in this program. Yeah. So Immediate impact? No. 2-year impact? Tremendous. Right? So, Mike, today in Hayesville doesn't solve your problem. But in 2 years, if we could turn out even 80% of those, you see the tremendous, we already have people that someone said you have it. You're already working great with kids, and now we're scaling them up in a much different way. I'm proud of what is going on right now, and those things will have an impact to the profession, even above those that are in the teaching pipeline right now. That's really important, I think, for us to know. And this is just one of many examples. I think you'll hear more about the examples as we go through the day, but I just wanted to pick that one out because I hear that a lot about the paraprofessional. It's true of other professions too, but I hear that, and these 3 universities in particular and many others are doing a lot of good work in that area. So the Blue Ribbon Task Force said there's some challenges to the teacher supply. You've heard some of those. I'm just going to give, this comes from the Blue Ribbon Task Force. I know the research that was presented this morning may say, you know what, we take odds with how the research nationally looks at this, but I'm giving you what they said after they looked at it. Low salaries. Now, I know that was not one of the reasons people are leaving, but Mike and I, again, we're having this conversation. I think it's so instructive. So I'm going to give you what I hear, which is what we do in K-12, right? No research behind this, other than when I'm out, this is what people say to me. You know, money doesn't become an issue for most teachers, what I hear, until you don't respect us. Talk about that. And then when you don't respect us, then a lot of other things become an issue because we went in this business to make a difference and salaries are part of that. But I also want to say this is about 1.5 years old. The Kansas legislature, I don't want to tell the story, I'm going to back up. I don't want to keep telling the story that we're chasing a test score. Hardest thing to do. You know, when we had our annual report, the media lined up. Sometimes the media never even comes to our meetings, you know? But they lined up. Couldn't wait to get the story about they're going to release the test scores. And then we talked about the test scores in relation to lots of things because that's all they know. They want to rank order schools and then make a judgment. We've done it for so long that we think it's commonplace now, and in other states even grade. So that's a different narrative. We have to start talking about a different narrative. Guess what? Low salaries, yes. 42nd in the nation, yes, true. And the Kansas legislature last year passed $200 million to go into education and another $200 million to go into this year. And the Supreme Court said, don't think that's enough. Put a little bit more into it and they'll come back and fix that. So the new narrative is there's a lot more money going to go into education. The average teacher salary, Dale tells me, somewhere between 4.5% and 5%. And we anticipate that that will happen next year and the following year and the next year. So there will be more money and that will impact salaries a lot and that will have an impact on this state. Current and ongoing stability of school funding. I think I just described that. So when the task force gave their recommendations, we were in a different era. Representative Rooker's going to be here this afternoon, and I hope it, past anything she says, I hope you tell her this, thank you. They don't hear that enough, all right? They hear a lot of stuff. You can thank her and every representative and every senator because they carried some heavy water and will continue to do so this legislative session. They are giving a stable source of funding for all the principals and superintendents and school boards to do going forth. It's important. And new changes to CAPERS, and guess what they did? We changed the CAPERS law to make it more stable. It's a uniform set of processes. Now, there's still a penalty, and why? Because CAPERS can't sustain itself if everyone retires at 55. That's just the reality. When the law went into effect, CAPERS had no idea how many people would exit early. And when they saw it, they said, we can't sustain that over the long term. That's why there's, quote, the capers penalty. But it's stable and it's uniform, and it doesn't have what Dale and I call the grandfather, the great-grandfather, or the son of the grandfather, you know, all the different ways to get there. This is really important, okay? Everyone understand? This Blue Ribbon Task Force, and when we look at this, they'll look at what we've already changed from a policy level standpoint in the legislature. Many people don't know about this. These are the rural opportunity zones in Kansas. Governor Brownback did this, as I mentioned when he first came in, said, you know what, if you go to Gove County, we want to increase the population. We want you to go there and start a business. And part of that was a forgiveness of loans, not just for educators, but for business people. And by the way, these are forgiveness of associate degrees, baccalaureate, master's, PhDs in the starred areas. When I'm out talking to teachers, there are very few people even know about this. So remember we said, oh, there's a shortage. Now, you're going to say, well, in Kansas City and Wichita, they're not rural opportunity zones. They're not. But all the ones that are starred are, and it's in conjunction with the county and the state. There are limited funds, but there are funds to repay those loans. And we have some counties where they're not spending the money. So we have to, this comes back to, are we telling the story about all the different paths to licensure? Are we telling the paths to already the financial things that can happen for teachers as we go through it? The other thing I want to mention about what I think the professor talked about is we're in the early stages of doing something called redesign of schools. You may have heard about it. It's a little bit of a big initiative on our part. And these are the Mercury schools. We called those and named those after the original seven Mercury astronauts. And Coffeyville's here today. And then the GEMINI schools, because as we scaled this up, and we said, well, we'd like to start with 7 because we can only work with a handful of schools. And we didn't know if we would have anyone apply, and we had 29 school districts, over 10% said they wanted to do this. Crazy people, because we have no idea what they were getting into, and then they're trying to figure that out. So we took all 29, Mercury and GEMINI. One actually did not go forward, that was Flint Hills, only because they said if you can't be here with us, we don't know that we can carry that out on our own, and that was fine. And you know what? Some of these may drop out because this is a lot of work. And if they do, that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. But here's what we noticed. I'm just going to jump back to the Mercury. I'm sure Craig can tell you this. The first thing we did was we went into the school. I'm going to smile to tell you because we had many conversations about this. And we said teachers are going to design this. In conjunction with the principals, we're going to go side by side. And for the first 30 days, they didn't believe us. Because you know what? We've never asked them to do it. We've said, how would you like to change your teachers, your classroom? How would you like to change your curriculum a little bit? Not how would you like to change your school? So for the first 30 days, Jay and Tammy would come back and go, well, we're struggling just a little bit. And then you saw it start to turn. And the next 30 days was there was excitement about, we're going to design this together. The teachers, the principals, side by side, the community, side by side. That was the next 30 days. Then the next 30 days, oh my gosh, this is hard. You know, the research, and we have different compelling interests, and I don't have enough time in my day to do it. All of these things. But here's what I believe. When the dust settles and we talk about what's going to happen, I think we're going to see these type of things come out. I think we're going to see a personalization of education. What will that look like? We don't know yet. You know, everyone wants to grab the Mercury and say, what does it look like? We don't know yet. It's not even Thanksgiving. We're going to launch it in the fall of 18, and it is on speed of, steroids. It's going to be project-based, though. You can already get to sense some of that real-world work with business and industry and pathways infused in that. I think it's going to be longer time with teachers. Kansas said they wanted that, maybe more than a 44-minute block or maybe more than 1 year, and immersion with parents in the community. But here's what I think may come out of it. May, because I don't know what it's going to look like yet. It may also, as we craft this for kids and parents, it may very well help eliminate some of the stress teachers feel today. All right, so as I said, K-12, we like to tell the story, Cindy. We oftentimes love the research, but we want to tell the story. So you're getting Randy's story of this as I travel around. I hear the frustration of teachers everywhere I go. And I hear it on two levels. First of all, I say, do you like your teammates that you teach with? Oh my gosh, they're the most wonderful people I've ever had. And my building and my principal, they're great. And my school board, this community of Humboldt is wonderful. Well, what don't you like? The legislature and the governor. And I pick up my tablet or my phone or the newspaper and nobody loves us. Well, so you love what you're doing, you love the people you work for, so it's, don't pick up the paper, don't go online, because there's a narrative that still wants to be said, and yet it's not the reality of what I see on the ground with that. The other thing I hear is this, oh, I'm so glad it's Thanksgiving, I'm tired. Because I have a caseload of 160 people in some cases in our secondary schools. Or I have 25 kids in third grade, from non-readers to reading at sixth grade, to behavior problems where I have kids sitting under my desk growling at me, to kids that are well-behaved and already ready to take on the world, it seems. And I've been told, you need to differentiate. And I'm like, get a life. And I think about that. It's the organization of school that has unintentionally put some stress on teachers because that system was created for a different group of kids and a different group of economic indicators. I had my 40th high school reunion a few weeks ago. A bunch of old people got together. I don't know, I looked at it, how did you get so old? And my kindergarten class was flashed up on the screen. Mrs. Smith's PM kindergarten class at Garfield Elementary School in Coffeyville. And by the way, class sizes in the 50s and 60s were not small. They were large as the baby boomers came through. And we had a 24, 25 in that kindergarten class, but I looked up there to the illustrious class that I was in, and what I noticed was social economically, academically, the gap was about here, from the poorest kid to the wealthiest. Last week I was in several schools, Garden City I mentioned. You know what the gap is today? It's here. And yet we still have the same, I got to go to kindergarten, I got to still do it. I taught in Andover. I was an American history teacher, caseload of 140, 52 minutes. In the 80s, my gap was here, it's here. That's part of the stress. I think the redesign may inadvertently get at that because of the way it will be designed for kids, may have a nice outgrowth that may be really good for teachers also. So I now threw another one on here, because I left it off before intentionally. Low esteem for the teaching profession. That was the fourth item. Where does that come from? Well, it comes some from what you've read. It comes from 3 o'clock in the morning due process being yanked from teachers. All right? It comes from a lot of areas, some of which we don't control. And I often think of what I can influence and what I have control over, and those are two different things. So this weekend, my family, very small, will descend upon the Watson household. My sister will, in some ways, my family is, one of the things I learned early on is my family, my extended family, and many of those have passed away. And we used to get together for Christmas and Thanksgiving. It inevitably turned into some kind of board game, which turned into a fight somewhere along the way. that my wife found very disturbing. We loved it. She would have to leave the room because she was like, oh, no, that's just the way we talk to each other. You haven't heard my uncles and my family. And her family would go in the kitchen and just whisper about each other, right? I'm like, just say it to their face, you know. Where did this person come from? You bring this person, all the things we say about it. So she'll say to me, she works at Children's Mercy, and she's in their communication department. And she'll say what she has said, we are a mission, vision-driven group. We want to serve children that are in bad shape. They may pass away. And we take that mission very, very seriously. We treat families, with respect. And you know what? It's stressful. We have turnover, and we don't always get along. She goes, but you know what we don't do? We don't go to Facebook and Twitter and complain about it. I don't know. I find that, she goes, and I find that interesting about the teaching profession, where you want to just complain about it. She goes, we just don't. And so it's an interesting discussion, right? And my wife leaves the room because we're in an argument somewhere on the way. But this weekend, I got the distinct honor of hanging out with these 8 people. These are the Kansas Teachers of the Year, 2018, and we honored them. And Paul talked about Sam in the top row, who was from Bueller and was named Kansas Teacher of the Year. But these 8 will be traveling together. And it was a wonderful event. Peggy Hill, the secretary of the state board, we talked briefly this morning. She said, Randy, I don't know that I've ever been at a more impressive event to honor teachers. Okay? So Sue's here and Cindy, a lot of other people that put that on. I just came in and ate a dinner, and got to shake hands. It really was. It really, really was an important thing. But let me just tell you, it's part of this low self-esteem. Here's how we choose them by congressional district. And I'm just picking on one area. See this area right here that I just highlighted? We had 1 Teacher of the Year nominated from that area this past year. And here's the story I hear. District after district after district. And by the way, I just could pick this in one area. I could go to Southeast Kansas and do about the same. I could go to other pockets. We don't have anyone that wants to stand up and be Teacher of the Year because I don't want those accolades brought upon myself. And Randy's on the soapbox. We have to stop that. It's not about Sam Neill. It was about the whole stinking town of Bueller being there, and Dodge City for Gil and all his family. It's about us honoring the profession. And we do a horrible job of it, including starting right here with Horizon Award winners and Teachers of the Year. We could easily say, as those 8 would say, I don't think I'm the best teacher in my pod, much less my building. It doesn't matter. What matters is your peers thought so. You're going to get the time of your life when we're going to gush about you for about 3 hours. You're going to get lavish with all this praise, and you're going to go across this state, learn more than you ever thought. You're going to grow professionally, and you're going to take that back, and you're going to change the profession forever. I think it's so important. We can change the discourse of that by the way in which we talk about our own profession. So as I traveled in the last year and a half, it was over and over. Randy, I want you to know, I'm telling people, don't go into the profession. You know what? I don't care what the state board does. I don't care what Kansas State or KU or Mid-American Nazarene does. If our own people are going to tell the young people, don't go in the profession, it doesn't matter what policy we scale. What we need to say is, we want you to go into this profession. We need to grab our best and brightest. We want you to go into this honorable profession. We want you to help lead it. And guess what? We have some challenges, and you're going to help even correct those even more than I was able to. That's the message we ought to have. So I'm going to leave you with this. I think it's about this for all of us. We can look at the data. We should look at the data. We should think about how we're going to scale that with policy. But what we can control, we have influence on a lot of that. What we can control is the narrative that we want to have. And we can give hope to young people by having an Educator Rising program in every single school district with a pathway toward education. We can outgrow District 1 and so on at the Country Club with every single school in that region having a Teacher of the Year candidate. We can outgrow the Holiday Manor with the Horizon Keen Conference with every single school district represented. We can honor, like we did, the 44 Kansas Teachers of Promise that walked across the stage and they're beaming. They were in shock Saturday. They were just thinking, I need to get through finals. And we rocked their world, our Kansas Teachers of the Year team, by saying, here's what the profession's going to do for you. And we can do that over and over and over again. So proud of that. So I'll leave you with this. Martin Luther King's, one of his many famous quotes, right? And I think it's about faith and hope. But if you think about it, it's not just a hope that hasn't any backing behind it. There's a lot of great things going on in this state. And we have challenges, there's no doubt. But the best is ahead of us, not behind us. And we have to have faith and hope that we get there. So Dean Mercer and all the people that are here, thank you for coming out on Thanksgiving week when you could have just been hanging out at home, getting ready to fill up, your bellies full of turkey and wrestling with this important issue and learning about what we can do collectively as a state. Thank you very much.